3, 2, 1.
I tell people all the time, loving us costs. It costs me. Those are risks that I'm willing to take. I don't center myself in America. I don't belong to America. I don't claim America in ways that I know so many people do. Yes, it is the place where I was born. Yes, it is the place where I reside, where I live. I know it's not mine. I am not here to serve white people. I am not here to save white people. And I know it might sound like, how do we make sense of this if ultimately the goal is to dismantle white supremacy? I also want to dismantle white supremacy from the perspective of getting black people to recognize it for what it is and therefore work towards dismantling it.
Dr. Yaba Blay is the teacher we all needed growing up. Dr. Blay, and that's doctor with an intentional lowercase dr, describes herself as an anti-academia academic, meaning academia is another system that needs reform. She is a Ghanaian American scholar, speaker, cultural worker, producer, and author. She wrote and art directed the stunning photography book, One Drop, Shifting the Lens on Race, that she originally self-published in 2013 and now re-released with not a single edit with Beacon Press. She was also a consulting producer on CNN's Who is Black in America? The conversation Yaba and I have is a much needed one I personally needed. Tears are shed and some healing goes on, and that's typical PODCAST NOOR style. We talk about being first gen, the battle of bicultural identity, the story we are told about America, what it means to do work that traumatizes you, the relationship between corporations and how they approach anti-racism work, and so much more. Buckle up, because this one goes deep. I think I say that about all of them, but this one just hit a little bit differently. Welcome to this guided storytelling session of PODCAST NOOR with Dr. Yaba Blay. Hello, Dr. Blay. I am so honored to have you here to talk about your work, to talk about what's on your mind, what's on your heart. I'd love to start out by asking you how your heart is doing today.
That's a lovely question that I always appreciate being asked, but honestly, I don't always know how to answer it because I can tell you how I feel. I don't know if that's how my heart is
Well, how do
necessarily.
you feel these days?
Right now, I'm annoyed and I'm frustrated, just with the general state of things, but at the expense of dating our conversation, this week we got news about Ma'Khia Bryant being killed by police, and the online conversations, the public conversations around it have been really, I don't even know the word, challenging, but not that other murders of black people by the state, not that they haven't affected me, but something about this particular one has affected me really bad. I had to take the day off just for self sanity and self care yesterday. And I think the thing that has been so disturbing is that, she's a black girl, she's a regular black girl. Um, and her TikTok videos, she's not
Yeah.
unlike my daughter, my granddaughter, my nieces, any other black girl that I celebrate and love on in this world. And the idea that her body communicated such, I don't even know how it translated in the minds of a white male cop, but whatever her body communicated to him told him to shoot her within 23 seconds of arriving, 4 times in the chest. And so it almost feels scripted. It almost feels by design. It almost feels strategic. And it's almost like, in our community, there's a phrase that we use, it's like playing in my face. It's like the idea that like you do it in our faces, and you do it in our faces knowing you'll get away with it. And there's nothing we can do about it. And so in mourning Ma'Khia, I mourn myself, I mourn my daughter, I mourn my granddaughters, I mourn my nieces, I mourn black women, I mourn black girls, I mourn Black youth. I mourn Black people. I mourn Black lives. I just mourn because we don't even get to just be. And so the online conversations are annoying because folks are like, well, she had a knife. I don't remember the little white boy's name, but I remember the image of him walking around with an assault rifle, and he lived to walk into, police custody. So I don't want to hear that she had a knife, because white people have all kinds of weapons and live to tell their stories and live to cry about it. I don't really even I have more feelings than I have words. I'm trying to hold
Mm.
space for all of us, all of my community. We're all mourning, we're all impacted by this, and I think we're all trying to hold space for each other. I received and sent so many texts and calls yesterday just to tell people that I love them, you know, um, and still life goes on. And so, this question of how I'm feeling today, it's like all of that's happening in the world, and still their emails, and still their deadlines, and still their follow-ups, and still their requests to show up with, you know rightness of mind and the ability to have a conversation, as if I just feel we're all being forced into some level of cognitive dissonance, because that thing can happen in the world and still you must continue.
So many things I want to respond to. The first just being that if at any point in this conversation you don't have the capacity, you don't feel like talking about it, it's just not there, this is just a platform to be of service to you. So my intention is only to do that. So please just let me know if that at any point you don't want to talk about something, or if you don't want to think about something. Of course, at your service. It is a perpetual grief consistently. I mean, and so many layers of grief. We're still in a pandemic. We're still holding our breath when we were waiting for the George Floyd verdict, which still wasn't entirely justice. But I had this thought loop the entire time we were watching, which was, how are we still not sure what the result is going to be? And it is almost a consistent thing. And it's, less than 48 hours later, 3 other Black people were killed by police. And what isn't America getting? We've heard things over and over again. People are yelling at the tops of their lungs, promises are being made, but what is not clicking in the brain of the subconscious of America?
Who says it's not clicking? Maybe America doesn't want to change. America doesn't have to change. We're frustrated because we are using some level of logic that says, well, if this is going wrong, you would do something to make it right. If this is its foundation and its history and the only way it knows how to be.
Does that mean America is not for everyone here then? Because I think there are so many sub-communities that are not of the dominant culture who have literally built this land, who have contributed to this land, who have struggled. I mean, you and I have talked about the struggle and complications with bicultural identity and being a first-gen person and holding these two things but not having these two things. So does that mean America doesn't belong to you and I?
It depends on who you ask. I just think there's so many realities happening simultaneously, right?
That's
And so
yes.
the work and the struggle is to sometimes come outside of ourselves, to perhaps attempt to see it from whoever America is, right? See it from America's perspective. Like, we have our lived experience and our perspective from the inside looking out, but sometimes it's a very important wake up call and important reflection, I think, to recognize how it looks from their perspective. So, of course, we know that so many of our people have built this country. Of course, we know and believe that America wouldn't be what it is without us, but I don't know. In fact, I do know. America doesn't appreciate us. I don't care what it says. I don't care what billboard, what elevator pitch. Like, what you value, you do. And if it was true, we would feel it.
Mhm. What does that mean for how you evolve in the relationship you have with your own work, and who does that work become for?
My work is for Black people all over the world. And so, what I've learned the hard way and over time is that I don't center myself in America. I don't belong to America. I don't claim America in ways that I know so many people do. Yes, it is the place where I was born. Yes, it is the place where I reside, where I live. I know it's not mine. And I don't know how to make that clear. It's my truth, I don't know how to make that any clearer than those words. And so when I say, you know, I do my work for Black people all over the world, irrespective of where we are situated or the lands that we are tethered to, because I do believe our experience is a global one, in the same way that white supremacy is a global institution, right? And so, notwithstanding where we live, those are the realities that we have to live with and deal with. And I think it's almost like somehow these national identities are crippling us because we want to believe that it's different in each of our countries. And though it is, right? We've all got our own kind of like remix and twist to these experiences. But when we're so tied and tethered to these spaces, right, we somehow believe that they are not connected to other spaces and other experiences. And it's very much tied to just the ways in which I think of Blackness as an identity and as a lived experience and as a lived reality, that it goes beyond these boundaries of land and space.
Thank you for sharing that. It makes me think about, what does hope mean today, and will America ever be something you feel belongs to you?
Again, I'm glad we started the conversation the way that we did, because I'll say in my defense, today might not be the best day to have that conversation with you. But I don't know that any day would be any better. I mean it when I say it. I don't know how it's received or how it sounds. My identity is not tied to this place. And so when we talk about hope and dreams and all of these things, it is for Black people. It is for Black lives. It is not for this country. I could pack up all of my things and move to another country, and my intention and my hopes and dreams would be the same for my life, for the lives of people who look and live like me, not for that country. And so give thanks for all the people, who have good hearts, good intentions, good hopes and dreams for this country. Of course, we need you. I'm not one of those people.
I appreciate you saying that, because you give space for people who feel that pressure and realize that they don't want to be one of those people. And oftentimes, especially today, with the promises being made by brands and corporations and the government and who whatever, and immediately just flocking to maybe the only people in a specific community that those people know, and expecting them to have all of the answers and expecting them to be of service to them immediately. It's almost like this subliminal responsibility that so many people, I've felt this way, that I owed others, or I was expected to educate or deliver on certain things. While I'm happy to do so when it's my choice today, I didn't know that I had a choice. Did you ever go through an experience when you had people coming to you in that capacity, where they were expecting things from you, where white people were expecting things from you, and you felt like you had to deliver, but you didn't understand why it felt uncomfortable?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I've never not understood my discomfort. Um, yeah, I don't know that I can pinpoint a time. That experience is real, particularly given the work that I do. Um, and it makes me question sometimes and want to even check myself, like, have I ever done that to any other group of people, right? But I think this idea that we think that any collection of people can speak on behalf of the entirety of the people is just uh it's just ill-informed. Um so yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but no, I can't think of an experience particularly.
You answered it with sharing that you know that it exists because of the work that you do. When I heard you give that response, I realized that it's rooted in shame. It's rooted in feeling like you don't belong. And so, in order to feel like you deserve to be there, you have to live up to a standard that was set in place by a specific white gaze. I still struggle with that. I look at my work and I overanalyze it and overanalyze it. And I'm like, who am I doing this for? Who am I doing this for? Who am I doing this for? Because for so long, especially because I work in media, I thought that the only way that I was going to be able to be here was if I was more like a specific white person or white journalist. And I realized that that also came from internalized white supremacy and thinking I had to dye my hair blonde or wear colored contacts or act a type of way or hide parts of myself that made me feel extremely lost. And I know so many people, I think from my experience, especially first gen or immigrant people, have experienced because they are still trying to find themselves. But something that I've realized as well is that we also have been put in situations that have forced us to know who we are, that have challenged our identity. Are you who you want to be, or are you who you expect other people to be? And I've noticed that oftentimes the fragility that comes from the dominant culture is that they've never had to really challenge their identities because it's always just been accepted. It's always just been there to experience. And then you have these situations where people can get away with so much.
It's interesting as you're talking, the word that's coming to me is interlocutor. And it's making me wonder, right, for the people that you speak of, and even as you reflect on your own relationship to this experience, like I wonder, because this question of who I do my work for, there are many people, Black people in this moment, who might self identify as quote unquote anti racist educators, for
Mm-hmm.
example, right? Folks who do quote unquote diversity, equity, inclusion work. And I don't identify. I have such an interesting relationship with identities, but I don't identify with those things even though I do work that might fall into that box, right? But I recognize that what happens so often with these terms and with these identities and with these labels, right, and titles is that when you hear diversity educator, you may automatically assume you know what that means, right? And that we all come to the table with the same intentions, right, or goals, even. And I know, particularly post George Floyd's assassination, enter everyone wanting to be woke moments that we've been in. There are Black folks who do this work with the express intention of teaching white people. They may even think that they're doing so for the greater good of all of us. And some of them might just be doing it because white people are also throwing obnoxious amounts of money at this work to assuage their own guilt, right?
Mm-hmm.
I, on the other hand, will always, and I'm not saying this, I hope you know, I hope my ego is not coming through first, right? This isn't not about boasting that I'm different in that way. I'm just clear that my work is for Black people. Ultimately, it's for us, right? So if I do anything that falls in the realm of that work, I do it for the betterment of our experiences. Like, I don't know if you curse on your podcast. I curse a lot, so I'm trying hard not
You
to.
can, this is for your platform.
I don't give a shit about white people in that regard. I am not here to serve white people. I am not here to save white people. And I know it might sound like, how do we make sense of this if ultimately the goal is to dismantle white supremacy? I also want to dismantle white supremacy from the perspective of getting Black people to recognize it for what it is and therefore work towards dismantling it. Like, yes, there is work in making sure that white people see it. It's almost like white people are an afterthought. Like, if you get something from my work, give thanks. But I'm not doing it for you. Does that make sense?
Uh, Absolutely. You're trying to get your community to truly understand what the system at play is.
Absolutely. I want us to even see, because I think the other thing too, like when we speak about language, people hear white supremacy, they might only think of Klans members, right? They don't think about, or, and in fairness, they may not have never learned about white supremacy as an institution an insidious institution with historical foundations, right? But when people hear white supremacy, they only think of white people, right? Which means, again, not understanding it as an ideology, as a value system, as a way of thinking, as a tool of colonization and enslavement, which means any of us who come from colonized and enslaved and marginalized communities can also be white supremacists. We can also be agents of white supremacy because it is reflected in our value system and our ideology. And so there are Black people, there are people who look like me who don't find value in Black life in the way that I do. There are people who look like me who are Black, who may actually believe the very things that we hear from racist white people. They may also believe that about Black people. And they may somehow distance themselves from those Black people and constantly be tap dancing to show you how they're different. I'm not one of those people. And again, I'm trying not to communicate this with judgment, because what I'm learning. I keep reminding myself that my goal is to always stay centered in my community, to always have love and respect for my community and for my ancestors and for my culture, my history. I try to be mindful of that. And I say that because I also have to recognize, for those Black people who are white supremacists, for those Black people who don't love Black people, for those Black people who are here to tap dance for white people, that given the way that white supremacy functions, I can't be mad at them. It's the ones who know better and still choose differently that
Right.
I can go toe to toe with, right? But when we think about our educational system, when we think about our families, when we think about our histories, like, to be very frank and very honest, when we think about the ways in which many of us have been acculturated away from ourselves.
Hmm.
We've been guided away from ourselves by our families, by our communities, because at a particular time, being too Black meant your Black ass could get killed. So, how do I hold on to your Black life? I train you to not be so Black in these white people's face because they don't like it. So you yes sir and you yes ma'am, and you speak in a particular way, and you straighten your hair, and you bleach your skin, and you name your children European ass names, and you do all the things to make white people comfortable just so you can be alive. My question is, what kind of life is that?
So are you a preacher?
I'm not.
Because my heart just jumped out of my chest.
I'm not.
Oh my gosh.
I have little rants that come. I'm
They're
sorry.
not rants. I think that, I mean, you're a scholar in that regard. You know what's interesting is, for a very long time, I thought that scholars were religion educated people who were teaching and preaching, and I never really clicked. I mean, I knew what scholarly and scholar meant, but I never really clicked that fully with academia until maybe, college. And there is that level of impact that you have as a scholar, as a teacher, that penetrates the heart and changes minds. I think teachers have one of the most important roles in the world. We don't pay them enough for it. Hi there. If you find our work beneficial and you want to support how we build our company at your service, you can subscribe to my Patreon at patreon.com/noor. It's usually personal writings, and as I build a community on there, hopefully more. Your support is how we build. I also curate a weekly newsletter of all the things I'm benefiting from and enjoying that week. Anything from what I'm reading, watching, listening, buying, and more. Like most things, I keep it personal. You can subscribe to it at noortagori.com/newsletter. Now back to the story. Do you believe that majority of people have internalized white supremacy to a level?
Yes.
You wrote a book called One Drop: Shifting the Lens on Race, which was originally self-published in 2013 and now re-released with a publisher years later. But you made this book because you needed to make this book, to the point where you got sick while making this book. What was it about shifting the lens on race that you needed people to understand based on what we were just discussing, what you were just talking about, that you are still pushing teaching today?
Very much born out of my love for blackness and black culture. I was trained in black studies. My PhD is in black studies, with a concentration on women's and gender studies. And the beauty of being trained in those areas is that we have a responsibility to not only center our communities and the work that we do, but to somehow also center ourselves. And so, whereas mainstream scholarship may encourage us to be objective, we know that there is no such thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've always started my work with my own story, right? And so, I am first generation Ghanaian born American, dark skin, kinky hair, reflective of my West African heritage, born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, where there is a long history of colorism, which is also very much connected to, the fact that New Orleans is a port city and so many enslaved Africans and enslaved folks from the diaspora, different areas of the diaspora, came through New Orleans. And so community there looks, you know, a lot of different ways, but there's a group of people there, a culture, history there, referred to as Creole, many of whom are recognized by their phenotype, racially ambiguous to some degree, light skin, what we call quote unquote pretty hair. They didn't look like me, right? So I was in a conversation a few days ago and someone asked me, when did I realize that I was dark skinned? And I'm like, before I knew how to spell my name, right? Because I wasn't dark skinned in my family. I'm not the darkest person in my family. I'm not the darkest Ghanaian that there is. So much of our identity is in comparison to other folks, yes? So that, children say the darndest things. Children let me know very early, like, oh, you're so black compared to who they were, right? So I knew I was dark skinned. I also knew that it was bad. I also knew that it wasn't desirable,
How
right?
did you know that part?
Because they said so. Like you so black usually is the preface to some kind of insult. Some reference to your hair. It wasn't a compliment. And so I had particular ideas of who I was. Also struggling with what it meant to live within and between two cultures, as first generation. And so I had I thought, clear ideas about what blackness was. I thought to claim a Creole identity meant that you didn't want to be black because black was bad, right? So even in the space of loving my blackness, I was raised by, black nationalist, Ghanaian nationalist father who was not, at least I wasn't able to share with him if there was any level of question of my pride, right? It was like, you are proud and that's it. So always waving a Ghanaian flag because of Kofi Blay. Um, Trust that. But again, identity being a comparison point, very strong lived experiences with colorism, right? And I made meaning of those experiences. And in a lot of ways, I made absolute meaning of those experiences, meaning that if you were light skinned, there were
Mm.
presumptions about who you were and what you thought about yourself in comparison to myself, right? Fast forward, I leave New Orleans, I go to grad school in Philadelphia, still connecting with black people from all over the diaspora, still hearing the pervasiveness of colorism. Colorism was the focus of my research, in grad school. I did my dissertation on skin bleaching in Ghana, And so constantly it's the same narrative. It was just proof, proof, proof that colorism exists in a particular way. I was a scholar. I knew what it was. Graduated, had this experience where I was on a panel, met a woman who kept identifying. We were talking about colorism in the diaspora. This is a woman who kept identifying as a black Puerto Rican woman from the South Bronx. And for as much as I knew, I was completely distracted by that because I had never I knew about Afro Latinx. I knew about the variety of ways that folks identify across the diaspora, but I had never at that time heard someone say Black Puerto Rican because, in my experience moving to the Northeast, folks said Puerto Rican so as to say not white or not Black, right? Clearly, I know it is a national identity, but in my lived experience and in my colored communities, right? I'm not Black, I'm Puerto Rican because those things were mutually exclusive. And so here's this woman saying, I'm a Black Puerto Rican woman from the South Bronx. I'm looking at her, I'm hearing her words, I'm looking at her, I'm hearing her words. These things don't match to me. And so I was intrigued and we talked. And I wanted to know, what does it mean to be a Black Puerto Rican? What is that? Now, again, understand also that, born and raised in America, definitely traveled to Ghana, right?
Yeah.
Hadn't traveled the world, right? And so much of what it means to be an American. I think about my addiction to 90 Day Fiance. I watch it like an anthropologist, but it just completely reflects the extent to which this American nationalist identity, where we keep talking about America being the greatest country on the planet, right? And that the truth is that most Americans don't leave America. And so you rely upon the media to show you the world. The Puerto Rico, and I had been to Puerto Rico. The Puerto Rico that I went to was San Juan. It was at a resort. It was at the beach. There are particular Puerto Ricans who come there for a reason, right? You would have to leave the resort to see the rest and the real Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
The same way you would have to leave the French Quarter to see the rest in the real New Orleans, right? I say all that to say my understanding of who I thought I knew Puerto Ricans to be was challenged by this person sitting in front of me. And so it just sparked something, another bright idea. I wanted to learn more about this experience of Blackness, not just from a diaspora perspective, but from the perspective of folks who may or may not look Black.
Mm.
Like, what does it mean to claim a Black identity when you are not readily received as Black and still you're chanting, I'm a Black Puerto Rican woman from the South Bronx? Even when people will ask you why, how? No, you're not, right? And so, most all of the people in the project have been asked the question, what are you? I've never been asked that question. I wouldn't even know how to answer it. I'd be looking at somebody like, are you all right? What do you mean, what am I? It's clear what I am. Is it not? What's wrong with you? But to be asked constantly, what are you? To be constantly put in a position to defend and define your identity, the, and we can talk about that more. The parallel for me is having to defend and define my Ghanaian identity.
Right.
I've had that experience, so I think I understood to some degree. But something as visible as quote unquote race, it's never been a question. So to talk to a large variety of folks from all over the world having similar and unique experiences where they've had to define their Blackness. And again, in my experience growing up in New Orleans, where folks seemingly, from my perspective, were claiming and or choosing a Creole identity so as to not have to claim or choose a Black one, right? It felt like a rejection of Blackness. In my experience, folks who had the option to be something other than Black took that option. Here you are. Listen to my language. You get to be Puerto Rican. Why would you claim Black? Fascinating to me. And so it started off really as my own individual selfish curiosity, turned into something else. I started this project. It was not, I'm going to write a book. I literally was doing a project. I wanted to know. And it grew into something. Um, and it became a book after it was more so like a social media kind of visual project. After I actually got tapped by CNN to co-produce their last installment of Who's Black in America. Um, it became a book project. And I attempted to get a book deal, and at the time, the book publishing industry was not interested because full color photography books are expensive. And I don't believe that they trusted that folks would buy it. And so, you know, some attempted to say, well, can you do it without pictures? We're talking about skin color. No, we have to have pictures and they have to be color. And so with that rejection, I was not going to be discouraged. And so that's why I published it myself.
It's the kind of work that you feel like you have no choice but to do, and you have to do it yourself, that it seems becomes the most rewarding, and it delivers in more ways than one. I'm kind of going through that struggle right now. I'm working on a documentary on the misrepresentation of Muslims in American media and how that's impacted us. And a lot of the people that I talk to are too afraid to take it on because it challenges our own industry and the way that we've told stories before. And many times I've broken down crying and just like, I know I can't give up on this because I need it for myself. And so that's a good thing. When you need something for yourself, it's harder to give up on it because you can't sleep at night until you figure out why this happened, why you went through this, why people feel this way.
Absolutely.
But it's still so hard. Honestly, it was really inspiring to see and learn about your journey with One Drop. Did you ever expect that it was going to be published again in the way that
No.
it has?
No. Worked on this book. I partnered with Noel Teilhard, who helped to direct the photography. We trotted all over the place, interviewing and photographing folks. I transcribed all of the interviews myself. I wrote the book. I paid an editor. One of my dear friends designed the book like it was a home team effort. I did a Kickstarter to raise the money to print it. IKEA bags full of books to the post office to ship them out. By the time I had the book release, Black Friday, 2013, I, I mean, anybody who was at that party, I wasn't there. I felt like a zombie. I was not there. I had worked myself into what felt like a catatonic state. And after that release, I remember being in bed probably for 2 days straight, not able to function. Rolled over, opened my laptop, and booked a trip to Florida. I went to the beach and I, laid in the sun and drank and prayed and cried and tried to wash it off of me in the water. And I came back and my granddaughter was born 2 days later. My eldest granddaughter, I was there for that. And it felt like an immediate shift for me. So whereas for most folks, your book comes out, they tell you spend the first 4 weeks really promoing, pushing. I didn't. I walked away from it and moved on to the next project.
Look at God.
Look at God. 7 years later, to have the book acquired by Beacon and to literally not have to make one change.
Wow.
They updated the front and back information. There's no edits to that book. There's an edit in the cover design. It looks different from the original that I put out. But content-wise, there are no changes to that book. And so it's surreal in a lot of ways. Um, in this moment also, again, ego always enters the space. So I try to recognize her when she does. So on the one hand, I celebrate, but then on the other hand, there's a part of me that's annoyed, right? That it's like it took for everybody to now want to be anti-racist for you to have interest in my book. But also, Yaba, shut up and let the people appreciate your book. Because what I also
Right.
know, not just that people are buying it to say, "Oh, I have it," and put on. People are reading it. People are
What an
opening up,
honor to know that.
yeah, to different conversations. And so I received that and I accept it. I'm honored by it. I'm thankful for it. Absolutely in a space of gratitude about it. But yeah, I would have never imagined.
Hmm. What would you tell Yaba on that day of the book launch if you were to look at her right now? What would you tell her?
You won't always have to work this hard. It doesn't have to be like this. It's like this right now. It won't always have to be like this. There was a part of me that felt, because it was the same with my dissertation, I just have always felt like I'm constantly fighting to get people to just pay attention to what I'm saying. Constantly. And feeling like I cannot give up. the point that I make myself sick trying to prove something to people that don't matter. That's what I would have told her on that day. And so now, 7 years later, I still work hard. I'm still frustrated by the amount of time that I spend that I work, but I know that people are listening to me, and it's because I stood in my truth and I told my story the way it needed to be told, not because it was the way someone else wanted to hear it. And I don't appreciate you making me cry right now.
I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Don't be. Because sometimes you need to know that you are not alone in whatever it is you are experiencing and feeling. Because what happens is we try to make it look good, right? We take pretty pictures with our books and look at me celebrating, I'm winning, and we're dead on the inside. That's the reality that a lot of people aren't willing to share.
It feels endless sometimes.
Of course, it will end if you don't waver from your truth. The reward comes. And I don't know it, it's not my experience, it's just what I've seen, but I can tell when people aren't doing it for themselves. They're either doing it for the money, they're doing it for the fame, the likes, the attention. That's not sustainable.
Yeah.
That means you'll shift and dance for whatever comes up at the time. Stand in your truth. The rewards are coming. There are probably rewards that you don't even see and feel yet. They're probably already holding you and you can't feel them.
What have you learned about mindfulness in being in the moment from that?
I don't know. I don't know. I have a beautiful community of sister friends who are so over me. I tell you, and I get it, right? Because I've had so many experiences where they just like you don't see yourself. And I know that I don't in so many ways. They try to show it to me, but like when you're not attached in a particular way, no matter how hard people try, you can't see it. And I feel like I'm finally starting to see it and feel it. So it takes time, but it also takes vulnerability and a willingness to be open to it. And it took me getting sick. It took my daughter crying and saying, like, I need you here. For me to step back and say it's none of this is none of it is worth it. None of it.
Yeah. I like sometimes I just, when things are really hard, I just say, well, you're going to die. So that's there. And not in a morbid, terrible way. But isn't it such a relief to know that it does end at some point and that you don't have to do this forever? And when you know that, doesn't that just, shouldn't that just remind us that just do what you know you need for yourself and do what you love. And when you are of service to yourself that way, it naturally becomes of service to everyone else. I think so many people take on an entire cause and burden. And it's almost, not to say it in a mean way, but it's almost selfish. Like, who do you think you are taking this whole thing on by yourself? When there is community for a reason. There's a reason that we have to build. There's a reason that we have to connect. There's a reason we have to share our stories. And one drop, I just, even knowing the story of it and knowing the story in it, it's a history book. It's rewriting history and giving people new narratives to learn about that we don't learn about in school so that they can feel seen, heard, and valued, and also have the language and the tools that they need to recognize the things that they're feeling. I don't know if most people in the world know what colorism is or know that term, but they know what that experience is. They know what it feels like. Skin bleaching is something that happens all over the world. And one of the things that you have said about skin bleaching and why you needed to do the research on it was the question, what is the value that light skin has that you are willing to die for it?
Mm-hmm.
What is the value that light skin has that you are willing to die for it?
And in answering that question, I have to come back to white supremacy. And I can be a broken record. I'll take that. People know that I say white supremacy over and over and over again. I choose that word over racism because I want us to shift from when people use racism, they make it the problem of select individuals as opposed to the foundation upon which our society has been built. And so this question of what is the value of light skin that you'd be willing to die for is not to put it on you as an individual, like how could you want to die for it? It's to say, of course you want to die for it. Here's the institution and the ideology and the history that made it so.
Is there in history a moment that we can pinpoint where this almost all started? I always think about that. Do we know when this all started? Do we know when someone out there chose a specific race to be better than all and then build a system on it?
My historical mind is drawing a blank, but there's so many black historians that can speak to this. And it's less about a date than it would be about a time period, perhaps. Um, but I'm drawing a blank in this moment. I think about white supremacy as the ultimate Jedi mind trick that we, the people who come from cold and scarce environments, are going to convince the people who come from literal abundance that they are inferior to us just so that we can take over everything that they have, just so we can force them to build nations for us. It's an ultimate Jedi mind trick. That's why it's so important for me to call
Wow.
white supremacy out by name because I need black people, dare I say people, quote unquote, of color, to understand that there are more of us than there are of them. They oppressed us for a reason. Look at their origins, look at their history. It is the ultimate Jedi mind trick.
I don't know why, while you were saying that in my head, I saw almost like an elementary school type animation showing the beginning of all of this and showing how simple and silly it was to start. Because the reality of it is, it literally doesn't make sense. I remember my now 14-year-old sister, when she was 8 years old, she came home and she had just learned about Harriet Tubman. And she had learned that Harriet Tubman was punished for taking an apple off of the tree in where she was living and working. And she came into my room and she started crying and said, I don't understand. I don't understand. Why did she get in trouble for taking an apple? And when you have a child, I remember she literally, I just turned on my laptop camera and I had her record a whole, she was preaching and she was just trying to understand as a child, like, it doesn't make sense. Our young minds, the purest form of our minds before they become tainted, cannot understand why inequality in this way and violence in this way would be something that people would think is a good idea, or something that, and it comes from scarcity mindset. It comes from thinking, I mean, Heather McGhee talks about it as the zero sum theory in white supremacy, that if you're doing okay, then I must not be doing okay, and we can't all do this together.
Yeah, only binaries. Only binaries. It's so much more complex than that. I also don't want to paint a picture that gives white people more credit than they should have historically, right? Because I think sometimes when we talk about it, it almost positions white people as they were like brilliantly strategic, right? I don't want to give them that much credit either. But it is to say, when I think of, Africa, I think of African communities, and they are original interactions with white people. I mean, I think the thing, we have to understand is that people of African descent have been moving across, traversing the world pre-white people. Like white people didn't start that, right? So there have been interactions, but when we think about people's lived everyday experiences, right? We have become African as an identity.
Mm-hmm.
We have become black as an identity. But in its origins, people identify with what they call, quote unquote, their tribe, right? I don't like the language, but we're here. They're tribal groups, they're ethnic groups, right? They're smaller communities. When you're living in Nkoko, Ghana, where my matriline is from, you may not know anything about a Nigeria, let alone a South Africa, let alone an Alaska. You feel me? You're there in your space. That's where you're centered, right? And so and I'm being very simplistic in this explanation, but imagine white folks coming in. We're talking about, original communities that may have already had conflict with neighboring communities for whatever
Mm-hmm.
reason. We have now become African. At that point in time, it was that group versus that group. There's no community in that, right? We're different people. Done. So enter white person who might want one set of resources from one group versus another set of resources from another group, and you insert yourself and insert tension, and you have these folks fighting, right? Or let's even take white people out. Maybe these folks were fighting already, and here come white people wanting something. I'll trade you human beings for the thing that you're giving me. You don't give a shit about those human beings. They're not your people. When we talk about the history of enslavement, people are like, well, Africans sold each other. We need more context than that. Because again, you're painting a picture as if we're savages, right? That don't care about our own people. We didn't see ourselves as our own. We didn't have to in that moment because our identities weren't framed in that way, right? And so to sell another human being into whatever destiny that's not someone that you're connected to in any way, how is that different than selling, a goat? And I'm just saying that again, I'm not trying to, I'm being very simplistic, but my point is understanding that oftentimes we talk about racism versus white supremacy. We talk about individuals versus institutions. Like, we need so much context to understand how things came to be, right? So yes, Europeans, it's not like, because again, when we paint pictures, this is why, as parents, please pay attention to how your children are being taught history. Because I've heard narratives from children that make it seem like big, strong Europeans entered Africa and snatched all the Africans who couldn't defend themselves and threw them on boats. Because it paints a picture of Europeans as particularly powerful in a way that they were not. Most Europeans didn't even go inland. They didn't leave those ports. They couldn't have survived, literally. Literally, they couldn't have survived in those environments, right? So we have to be careful about how we even spin the narrative, how we tell the narrative. And that's why I say I don't want to give white people more credit than they deserve. But it's the same way we talk about quote unquote cowboys and quote unquote Indians. We talk about the pilgrims and the quote unquote Indians. Our histories are strategic.
Mm-hmm.
They are not fact. You teach children in a particular way, and they will continue to repeat that narrative for the rest of their lives and continue to think of you in a particular way. You are no hero.
Yeah. I mean, my husband and I often have conversations about how young people are taught history, how we were taught history, how the textbooks that my younger siblings are using are the same textbooks that I used. And just reading the things out of them and knowing that, these books were written by very specific people. I'm relearning history now. One of my really good friends, Zarin Burnett III, he has a podcast called Black Cowboys. It is almost a cinematic experience. There's the sound, the scoring, and the sound effects, and just the storytelling. Never heard of any of these stories before in my entire life, but wow, did the Wild West at it for a period of time have an experience that we never
No.
even knew about.
And why would you? Why would you?
It's the most interesting thing about our history, I think. It's the most interesting thing about American history is that period of time, the relationship between indigenous people and Black people, and how cowboys were coming about, and the lawlessness, but like also the unsaid laws. It's just, I think that you would really enjoy it. It's so fun.
I will absolutely check it out. But that's my point.
Yeah.
History is strategic. There's no way you could learn history in K through 12. There's not enough time to teach you all that we
But
should.
even the amount of time that we do get, we're not learning history the right way. But it's a hard thing to say because technically with history, no one knows 100% of the truth. That's just how it is because we weren't there.
No, but also understand that history is an agent of national identity. The history that you are going to learn in America is not the history that I would learn in Ghana. I need to teach you a particular history to make a citizen and a patriot out of you.
A Columbia University professor taught me that America's number one export is its story and its story of a dream. And I've never forgot about that because, you know, even just thinking about my cousins in Libya and the conversations that we would have when we would go in the summertime, and America was the place that everybody wanted to be. I remember even my dad, when he immigrated here, he got rejected from coming to America. He was trying to go to Australia instead. All he wanted his whole life was to leave Libya because we were under a dictatorship. And he happened to bump into someone who was running at the time in London who worked for the embassy, and that's how he came to America. And he built this life for us. And there was, I don't know if it was this period of time, but there was so much struggle, you know? I was born in West Virginia. My dad was at Marshall University doing his residency. And I recently watched a home video of my baby shower, like when that they were having in the hospital. And there were my dad's friends, quote unquote, or colleagues. And there was this one man, this white man, who said to him, yeah, now when you go back to Libya, Gaddafi's just going to go kill you, or something like, oh, you're going to get killed, but like in a joking way. And my dad jokingly like laughed, like hesitantly. And I knew that like he didn't register that as what was actually happening. I have the tools and the language to understand. I mean, my dad hadn't been in America for that long at the time and didn't really understand, there's still like cultural differences, sarcasm, jokes, the things that go over your head. But I started crying. I watched him be told something derogatory, and it just put a pit in my stomach because it makes me wonder how many more times does that happen? How many times has that happened? And I mean, I know that now there was a moment, was it in 2011 during the Arab Spring, or maybe at the beginning of Trump's presidency? I don't remember. But at the hospital that my dad's worked at for decades, someone was walking in front of him and then said, I don't want to walk with a Libyan behind me. So he like stopped and did something. And it's interesting to see that when your parents don't, like, I get more offended by that.
Of course.
Why is it that the children of immigrants get more offended and more hurt by the harassment that their parents endure firsthand?
I'm just going to keep coming back to the Jedi mind trick, right? Like, and you started this by talking about your professor who taught you that America's, what was it, the biggest export?
The biggest export is America's story.
I think about this often, right? I'm going to give you another 90 Day Fiancé reference point.
Yes, we love this. I'm going to watch it tonight for the first time, and it's all going to be because of you.
You have to go all the way back. There's so many seasons. But one of the more popular couples, Michael and Angela. Michael is in Lagos, Nigeria. Angela somewhere in Georgia, right? Now, Angela is like, whatever you think of white Southern Georgian outside of Atlanta, she's it.
Okay.
She's in her 50s, maybe. Country. Michael is young, probably half her age, maybe, or maybe he's 30s. And they meet online. And immediately, he loves her. Now, again, excuse me, I don't want to question their love, but as a daughter of immigrants and who's familiar with many stories, we know that there are many people who get married just so they can get a quote unquote green card,
Green card.
right? He seems to be interested in getting his green card. Anyway, him and Angela up and down, back and forth, like they have a wild relationship, quite entertaining. Then comes the time, and Angela has the power now. A, because she's white, B, because she's American, or maybe those things are together, right? She proposes to him. She goes to visit in Nigeria, and there's a moment they had been talking about it, and it's like almost like something she'd been dangling in front of him. And if he doesn't act right, it's not going to happen. It's always this power push, right? Because she holds the power for this canine, is it canine visa. When she proposes to Michael, Michael literally jumps up and dances. Like you can see the joy in his face. And she gifted him with a pair of American flag boxer shorts and like an American flag that he could hold. And so they cut. And Michael's like, I'm coming to America. I'm coming to America. Donald Trump, I'm coming to meet you.
Oh,
Right. I use that example because I often wonder, my parents immigrated in the late 60s. I often wonder what 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 the hell did America represent for you to leave everything, right? What is it that America represented that you would leave everything and start anew in a country you know nothing about? I think about it very selfishly. When I go to Ghana and I see my cousins and how they were raised and the community and the family that is there, there's a visible and visceral distance. I love my family, they love me, but I wasn't raised with them. There's a part of me that resents not having that. And everybody says it's for better opportunities, it's for a better life. This wasn't a better life for me if I think about it in that way. If I privilege family and culture, this wasn't a better life for me, but I'm speaking selfishly. America represented something so great to y'all that you left everything to start anew in a country where you didn't have family, where you didn't have a support system. You were willing to do it that way because of what
and they didn't have the technology to communicate with their families the same way we do today.
no,
No
but
FaceTime,
even
no Skype.
nothing. Literal pick up phone dial operator to get you connected, maybe to
If
a
you could
phone.
afford it.
A phone, because my grandmother absolutely didn't have a phone in her compound. So that means she had to go somewhere else to get the call, you see?
Mm-hmm.
And so what is it that America is communicating in this world? Because even now, 90 Day Fiance is a current, phenomenon, but that desire to come to America is still there. And what they constantly say is better opportunities for my family. Want to be able to take care of my family. Everybody talks about going to America, making enough money so they can send back to the family. So then you have the families who are in support, right, of
Right.
these makeshift relationships because they believe that they're going to get something out of it when in reality, hello, reality is if and when you get accepted and you come here, you can't work for the first 6 months. You cannot work. You are completely reliant upon your sponsor, completely, right?
Right.
So you have to get married within 90 days, which is why they call it 90 Day Fiance. But for the first 6 months of being in this country, you cannot work. You are completely reliant upon your sponsor, right? After the 6 months, unless you are highly trained and skilled, what job are you going to get that's going to take care of you and give you all the money that your family is actively dreaming about? Because again, America, I don't know if they think the streets are paved with gold. I don't know if they think money is coming out the skies, but they literally think we are all rich. And maybe comparatively, right? Maybe comparatively, we have much more privilege, much more access. Of course, I acknowledge that. But it's like, I don't know. It makes me think of Eddie Murphy's Coming to America. Like, it makes
Yeah.
me like, what are the images that are swimming in your mind? But also, they didn't make it up. So, what images are being projected about America for folks to want to be here? How did we get to a place where everyone has come to believe the biggest lie there? Like, America is the snake oil salesman. Like, America is not the greatest country in the world.
Is it media
Absolutely, it's media.
and media representation of America?
Absolutely. And let me come back to this statement about America not being the greatest country of the world. Let me take that back. I'm going to just I'm going to pose it as a question instead of a
Okay.
statement. Is America the greatest country in the world? And if your answer is yes, give me the characteristics of greatest
Ooh.
based upon what?
What are your characteristics of greatness?
I don't know. I wasn't actively thinking of them, but it's more of a question, right? I'm just wondering, because again, it's the question of what is it that y'all see in America that would make you leave everything behind to get access to it? Think about if I go on Delta right now, a plane ticket to Ghana is probably going to cost me upwards of $1,500 to $2,000, just economy, okay? I don't know what it cost in my parents' day and time, but I gave you the parameters. You come for 90 days, you must get married. First 6 months, you cannot work. How long is it going to take for you to save that money to be able to go back home and visit and also be carrying with you all the things that your family expects? I remember very clearly.
Oh, how many suitcases did you
How
take?
many suitcases? How many
Filled with everything here. That's
Not to mention the barrels that were probably already sent.
oh
This
my
is
gosh.
before they had like the kind of baggage restrictions we have now and the weight I remember when you could take 80-pound suitcases. I remember when my suitcases would have probably a quarter of my things and my mom would be like, we're using the rest for everybody else's stuff. And then she would literally have clothes made for me when we got to Ghana. I remember this.
She would have clothes made for you in Ghana because you couldn't bring your
I wasn't taking anything. She wanted me to bring them all back anyway.
That's
So she
so
might have
good.
packed my panties and stuff like that and shoes, but no, we have, and it's not even that I
They
want
still
to.
do that. My
Of
family
course,
still does this.
of course, they still looking for me at the airport. Of course, of course. And I'm not going to say they didn't want to, but trust me, they were expected to.
Oh, 100%.
I'm talking about
I've
lists
had
of things.
family rifts in my family because of bringing things over
Of
and
course,
who's going to Libya, who's going to America, who's bringing this stuff.
of course. Or every morning, because everybody gets up with the roosters, someone knocking at the door with pleading their case about why they need some money. Auntie, can I have? Because Auntie has clearly got suitcases of cash.
You're a billionaire.
You have to be, right? And we can laugh about it, right? And again, it is not to cast any shame or fault on my family or our families or anyone back home, but it is to say I'm coming back to this point. This Jedi mind trick of whatever people think America is, these aren't isolated incidents. This is what I'm saying about white supremacy, why it's so crucial to me that we unpack white supremacy, because these are all like cogs in the wheel. They're all cogs in the wheel. You got to tell history in a particular way. You got to project media in a particular way.
It's also why other countries invest so much money in Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
The stories that come out of this country are the stories that people believe. And unfortunately, for many of us, that has been fatal to our communities. Those stories have gotten people in our communities killed. And it's why I care so much about being in this space. I'm sure it's why you care so much about being in academia as well, because
Sure.
we have to change the story.
And what I was going to say is, I'm sure for you and I, it feels like what we have to do because it's the truth, right? Understand how brave we are, though. You know how many of our people won't do it because of I tell people all the time, loving us costs. It costs me. Those are risks that I'm willing to take. Risks that I feel like I have no choice but to take. If not me, then who? There's so many of our people who also understand the insidious nature of white supremacy, and they're thinking about so many other things. And so again, for me, the work is not judging them, not casting shame on them, because of course you feel that way
Yep.
if I understand white supremacy.
Mhm.
Even in the United States, even in the context of academia. You know how many black scholars are only going to tell particular truths so that they can get tenure, so that they can get promotion, so that they can be the talking head that's called to be on CNN, MSNBC, and all of the other spots, right? I know I'm very clear. I'm thankful of the ways in which my life and blessings are manifesting in this moment, but I also have never expected or depended upon it because I know who I am and I know how I talk and I know that that's not what people want to hear.
But
Trust
you
me,
know
I'm
what?
not. I'm not the diversity person you want to come to your company to speak. I know you. It works now. Again, I'm thankful. Please book me. It works now, but I'm also very clear that like I'm not coming to your. I'm not coming into your space and making you feel comfortable with a reality, with a history, with an ideology that should not make you feel comfortable. You are not
Mhm.
my audience. So if you want to know what I think, I'm going to tell you. And it's not.
You can do that though because you know who your audience is, because you know who you're serving. When people try to serve everyone and they try to be as broad as they can, they end up serving like watered down versions of for some people. And it's also part of the internal conflict. But the amazing thing is,
I also wanted to just throw in there. Let me also be clear. I'm not only talking about white people. There are lots of black people who don't want to hear what I have to say either. Because I put them at risk. They have to distance themselves from me. I'm not that kind of black. That black makes you uncomfortable. That black is a problem. Look at me, I'm a better black.
what is being better in that regard mean?
Being white supremacist. Also believing the things that white supremacy projects about black people. Also believing that you have to work twice as hard, twice as long, right? Also believing that you have to, I mean, even when we just talk about simple body politics, your hair has to look a particular way, your skin color should be a particular hue, your body type, maybe, the names that you name your children, how you speak, the food you eat, where you vacation, who you vacation with, who your friend circles are, what you do, what type of music you listen to, what type of car you drive, which cul-de-sac you live in, which city you live. On and on and on and on. How do I perform? And the thing about it is, in fairness, most people don't even recognize their own performance. That's the insidious nature of white supremacy.
I do think too that for a lot of us, when you have the language, when you learn what you just taught, it's almost like a light bulb just went on. And
You can't
takes a
tell.
lot of therapy and work on your insides. And it's a forever journey, but you are a leading example. You haven't compromised on your identity or your beliefs, and look at how successful you've been. And look at how successful you feel in your heart. And you know yourself, because you can have no money in the bank, you can be dealing with health issues, whatever it is. You can have all of those things, those life things that make us all human, that we all go through at some point in our lives. But if you know who you are and you haven't wavered on that, your spirit can feel at peace, because
No,
everything else is temporary.
no, I received that, and I hope to live that, and I remind myself of that. And quite honestly, there are moments where I get pissed, I get annoyed when I sit back and watch the folks who take up certain space, the folks who I know are making ridiculous amounts of money at the expense of our lived realities and truths. It's
Mm.
annoying. It's annoying.
Annoying is such a cute word for it.
It is, but I also am continually reminding myself, and my community continues to remind me that I cannot focus on that.
Yep.
I can't focus on it. There's nothing I
Yeah.
can do about it. Let those people be. But I feel good about what my name will represent when I'm no longer here.
You are So blessed to be able to say that statement.
Thank you.
And it did not come without turmoil on the inside and the out.
And it continues.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the storytelling session. I just wanted to share something with you. If you're looking for a good deed opportunity these days, my family has been working to alleviate local homelessness for over 10 years. We have a foundation called I See You, and we make care packages for people experiencing homelessness. We make family food bags with food staples and give out grocery gift cards to families in need and more. Everything is done by donation, and 100% of the money goes towards community members in need. If you'd like to donate, you can through Venmo at ISY Foundation or PayPal to contact@isyfoundation.org. If you or someone you know is in need in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area and could use our help, please DM on Instagram ISY Foundation or shoot us an email. Now back to our story. Thank you. Thank you for talking to me, for being so open, for crying with me and letting me cry. Just hearing you say that, I didn't know that I needed it. It felt like medicine. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I have some not so rapid fire questions that I'd like to ask you.
Okay.
First one is, what song do you listen to for joy?
That changes so regularly. Here lately, it was Luther Vandross's 70th birthday a few days ago. I have been listening to Luther Vandross on repeat, but my favorite Luther song is Never Too Much. It makes me so happy.
I love that. I'm making a playlist of all of the songs that our storytellers have shared with us, and the question is always for joy, so it's just like an all joy storytelling playlist.
Nice.
So thank you for sharing your contribution.
You're welcome.
What book did you read during quarantine that changed how you feel about something?
I wish I had time to read, but I did reread for the gazillionth time my favorite book, which is The Color Purple by Alice Walker. And every time I read it, I see something else.
Well, one of our storytellers on this season is actually her daughter, Rebecca Walker.
Oh, yay.
And I just did her Art of the Memoir course a couple of weeks ago, and it was really amazing. It was such a special experience.
Nice. I need to get into that myself.
Oh, you should totally do it. You would love it. If I were to visit New Orleans, what is the perfect day trip there?
What do you mean by day trip?
If I had one day to hang out with you in New Orleans, what would we do to have the perfect day?
Oh, we would eat and drink. That's it. You'd have to train now. We'd be drinking all day. We're going to start with that. No, we're going to start with mimosas. We're going to have brunch somewhere. Maybe we'll go to Cafe Du Monde and have beignets. And
I love their beignets. I actually don't drink alcohol, which might be better for me because then I can just have so many virgin mimosas and mocktails and just hang out with you, enjoying every minute.
Can we just make an excuse for one day? I'm like, you gotta have daiquiris. No, we would eat. I've been considering taking a quick trip to New Orleans just to eat. I'm like gumbo and crawfish and jambalaya.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm fully vaccinated, so if you did want to go with someone, I'm so happy to attend and eat every single thing. And this is not a joke. I completely 100% mean that.
Do you like spicy food?
Yes, of course.
Okay, I have to ask.
I'm still North African. Like, it's still there.
Okay, well then we're good.
I'm so excited for this. When I go to Ghana, one of my best friends is Ghanaian.
Nice.
What do I have to eat there, and where do I have to visit?
Ooh, what do you have to eat? I'm so greedy. It has to be only one thing or no?
No, no, no. I want so much.
Okay.
I'm fasting right now. It's Ramadan. I'm fasting and I
Yeah.
need to hear about food because it
Food.
makes me so happy.
Okay. So for breakfast, you're gonna have plantain and spinach, maybe some boiled yam and boiled egg, right? And then maybe snacks time, you might have some gari photo, which is gari, which is a grain, but it's made with like a tomato sauce and palm oil situation. Snacky food. You might have some kebab from the roadside. We might get you some. Oh, you gotta have fufu. You have to have
What's
fufu.
fufu?
Fufu is a pounded yam, and they make it into like a softball and you eat. One thing that one of my favorite professors who's Ethiopian taught me, and not that he taught me, but he said it one day, because I love eating with my hands. And of course, people who are not from cultures where we eat from our hands, they look at us like, what's wrong with you? But he's like, holding up his four fingers, he's like, this is the cleanest fork you'll ever have, right? Which made me feel so proud. Like, that's right. This is my
That's,
damn
yeah.
fork, right? But we eat most of our food with our hands, and so fufu is something. It's a pounded yam you eat with soup. And you eat in a lot of places in West Africa. Of course, you have to have jollof rice.
Oh,
People will
yes.
try to tell you that Nigerian jollof is better. They lie.
I
Ghanaian
knew you
jollof.
were going to say that. I knew it.
Okay, you just trust me. I'm your friend. Um, My favorite Ghanaian dish is I love okra. Most people don't like okra. I
I love
love
it. We call it bamia.
the slimier the better.
Mm-hmm.
And so we make an okra stew or soup, they call it. I call it a stew, but okra and crab and shrimp and meat, whatever you want is in the. You know what? When we speak about cultural ties, okra and gumbo are cousins because the best gumbo has okra in it. Okra and gumbo are cousins. It is the same thing, except ours might have more of a texture because you eat it with your fingers. So that's why the slime is there, to pull it, whereas gumbo is more of a soup.
Wow. Fun
Right.
fact.
Yes. And so okra's a favorite. There's also, I know we're not supposed to eat tilapia, fine. Grilled tilapia.
Wait, even in Ghana, though? Like in Ghana, we still can't have tilapia?
I don't know. I mean, we're gonna have
Yeah, yeah,
tilapia.
yeah, yeah. Okay, cool, 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 cool.
For the health conscious people, turn their nose up at tilapia. But tilapia, grilled tilapia. Um, ooh, now I'm hungry. I think
See? It's so
I think
great.
those are my favorite. But you know what? Also, I love that I don't get here. Of course, plantain, which we eat all over the
Yeah.
diaspora, whether it's fried or grilled or what have you. But there's also fried yam, which in some places, they
Ooh.
cut them almost like big French fries. Just amazing, and you eat it with hot pepper.
Oh, yeah, I've had that.
Our pepper is called shito.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Do you
let's
make
stop.
Ghanaian food?
Don't do that to me
Okay,
publicly, please.
sorry. Cut. It's okay if you ask me the same question, I would literally respond with just blushing my cheeks. I would never tell you not to say something though. I would just be like,
It's
"Ugh."
all good. No, it's much to my mother's chagrin. I do not. I can fry plantains.
I
Uh,
want your fried plantains then. That's it. I just all I want, just that. And
Thank
where
you.
should we go?
Ghana is a magical place. Unfortunately, I haven't been any more north than Kumasi, which is the capital. I really want to go to northern Ghana. I think we might enjoy that together, primarily because culturally it's more, I don't even know the word I want to use. It's so ancient from what I've seen, and a very big Islamic culture there.
Hmm.
And what's so interesting when you look at that area, there's like a circle you can draw, and it's mostly Hausa people. And Hausa are, West African Muslims. I've always wanted to see northern Ghana. But if we go where I know, then, we could go to Kumasi to do the kind of tourist things for you to see the palace and the golden stool and such. But I would want to take you to to drive the coast from Accra to Cape Coast so that you can, when we get to Cape Coast and Elmina, we'll go to the dungeons. They call them castles. They are not castles. They are the dungeons where enslaved Africans were transported. We'll take you there so you can see for yourself. It's very haunting. But why I love that drive is that Cape Coast, quote unquote, castle and Elmina, quote unquote, castle are the two that were restored and the two that you can go to for tourism. But when you drive and you look, you can see the ones that have been abandoned. There's so many.
Whoa.
There's so many.
Wow. Ooh, that's like a haunted, that's like where you
Yeah.
go and write a horror book. It's like a
Yeah.
historical fiction,
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
travel. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Great.
And so
I can't wait.
you just have to see it for yourself.
Who is your favorite scholar who you enjoy learning from besides yourself?
There's so many. Don't make me do that.
You can name a few. It's okay.
I really enjoy. Now I'm drawing a blank. I feel like I have to name all my friends because they're all so brilliant.
Okay, name your friends. I would love that.
I claim a feminist identity because of one of my best friends who I went to grad school with. Her name is Dr. Kyla Story. Kyla is one of those people who I wish was getting her flowers. She is absolutely the reason why I claim a feminist identity. She's the person who showed me that I was already feminist and just afraid of the language. But she's beautifully brilliant and she teaches in such a simple way, yet so powerful. So absolutely, Kyla. I'm gonna give that to Kyla. Kyla is my favorite scholar.
I love that tribute. And finally, what do you know for sure?
What do I know for sure? I know that Black is beautiful, Black is resilient, and that joy is my birthright.
This is me the whole time in our interview on my insides, just dancing, shaking on the inside. Dr. Yaba Blay, how can we all support you and your work?
You can buy my book. My book, One Drop, Shifting the Lens on Race, finally back in stock.
What's your favorite bookstore we could buy it from?
Well, I would just love if you would support your local independent Black-owned bookstore. You can locate one if you're not familiar, going through bookshop.org. There are two here in Philadelphia that I would love if you could support. If you can't pick one, it's Uncle Bobby's and Harriet's bookstore, both in Philadelphia. And you can find me online, yabablay.com. And I'm also on social at Yaba Blay.
Oh, and why do you lowercase the D in Dr. Yaba Blay? I didn't even get to look at my questions really because we were just in this little heart moment, and that was the thing I was the most curious about.
I like playing with words and I like playing with language. I've always respected Bell Hooks, for example, who chose to write her name in lowercase letters as a way, a nod to anti-capitalism. And so many people I respect do the same. Dream Hampton, Adrienne Marie Brown. I wasn't at the place where I was ready to write my entire name in lowercase letters. But in writing the doctor in lowercase, for me, it's less about being anti-capitalist as it is about somehow trying to knock the title down a peg. And it's there. So yes, you can respect the fact that I have earned a PhD and therefore earned the title of doctor, but it is not the entirety of my identity. If I didn't have to lead with it, I wouldn't. But since I should, I'm lower. I'm just, it's there, but don't give it too much power.
I feel like you just saying that is more power than actually giving it power. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. What an honor it is to learn from you and hear from you and just be guided by your stories. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this guided storytelling with Dr. Yaba Blay. For more Dr. Blay, you can follow her on Instagram at Yaba Blay, and you can check out her website, yabablay.com. You can also buy her book, One Drop, Shifting the Lens on Race, anywhere you get your books. And I mean, it's a gorgeous coffee table book with beautiful glossy photographs. I know you'll enjoy it. If you'd like to watch the video version of this podcast, it is up on YouTube or Facebook, both /Noor. And to you, our listener, I want to thank you for your listen and support. I'd love to stay connected. Here are some ways I'm telling stories these days. You can text me if you are in the US or Canada. Yes, it is me, not a bot. I also text you intentional daily questions of the day. My number is 301-246-8894. You can follow us on social, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube @Noor, and on Instagram @AYS. My Twitter, Snapchat, and Clubhouse is ntagori.